All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs. It's Thursday, April 27th, and we are picking up our work this morning with an updated draft 5.2, I believe, is the most current one of S17. And Tim, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Chair McCarthy. Before you, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. For the record, my name is Tim Devlin, Legislative Counsel. Before you, you do have draft 5.2 of this committee's strike all amendment to S17, an act relating to sheriff's reforms. The updates since the last iteration of this bill that was reviewed by the committee have been highlighted for ease of reference and can be found. Let's see, the first one appears on, scroll down, under sheriff's duties on page 12. And this is section 6, which will amend 24 VSA, section 293, titled duties. And let's see, we can see here in what is now section subsection C, I'd just like to point out that the previous subsection C has been deleted, and that language was each sheriff's department shall comply with the provisions of standard operating procedures manuals and policies manuals created by and maintained by the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs. So that has been removed. The old section D has been moved up into the new subsection C.
So Tim, the old section C was the one we talked about yesterday afternoon, where it was really saying potentially could be interpreted as any detail about, how to keep your time cards. We talked about the example of, weekly versus biweekly payroll potentially, that any administrative detail in any model standard operating procedure could be interpreted as being required statutorily with that old C from yesterday. And so we took that part out, right?
Yes. Okay. Now, D, and this relates to the standby services provided by law enforcement officers to survivors of domestic violence, has been broken into two sections, the old section D. One is really maintains that language that was seen in version 3.1, kind of a reversion to the language based on the service being provided if asked for by sheriffs. And then we have added a section 6A with that prohibition language for charging fees to those survivors. That will now exist in Title 20, which our office thought was a little bit better fit because it pertains to to public safety in general, versus Title 24, which is where we find the sheriff's statutes housed. So reading through this.
Maybe you're going to get there in section 6C, there's got to be a few word changes in that. Were you just about to go through that?
Yes. Okay, that's right.
There's a couple of words that need to be changed, I believe.
Okay. I'll read through it and then we can perhaps discuss exactly what. Okay. So on line 18, C reads, if an individual who has a relief from abuse order pursuant to Title 15 VSA, section 1103 requires assistance in the retrieval of personal belongings from the individual's residence, and that individual requests assistance from a sheriff's department providing law enforcement services in the county in which that individual resides, the sheriff's department shall provide the assistance.
Yes, so going back up, when it says 1103 requires assistance in the retrieval of a personal belongings from the individual's residence and the requests, and they request assistance, and the requests.
And that individual, right?
Yes.
Is that where you're reading Representative Leaf?
After belongings from individual residents and the requests assistance. Does it make sense?
Are you reading?
Maybe an outdated version.
Are you reading 5.2?
I am reading. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so maybe drafting ops caught the.
That's precisely what happened. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No problem. Let's give Representative Higley just a moment to make sure everybody's looking at the right draft. That's always the challenge when we have iterative drafts floating around.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, so now that we're all on the same page, Tim, you want to go ahead and read through what C says now? Let's just make sure we're all kind of,
Yes.
thank you.
Again, subsection C will read, if an individual who has a relief from abuse order pursuant to Title 15 VSA Section 1103 requires assistance in the retrieval of personal belongings from the individual's residence, and that individual requests assistance from a sheriff's department providing law enforcement services in the county in which that individual resides, the sheriff's department shall provide the assistance.
So Tim, in that version, we're going for at least solving the issue where the Senate as passed had kind of made it exclusively the sheriffs that were providing standby services, or at least it could have been interpreted that way. This says if the request comes directly to the sheriff's office from the individual, they'll provide that assistance, but it doesn't make it so that the sheriffs are the exclusive provider. Is that
That's correct. And I would further qualify it by saying that the request would have to go to the sheriff who covers that area, provides law enforcement services to that area.
Right, so somebody in Wyndham County calling the Franklin County Sheriff, it's not like it's the Franklin County Sheriff's. Right. Representative Waters Evans.
Thank you. So this means that they can't not provide the assistance.
They shall provide it.
Okay, they're obligated to.
Yes.
Great.
So Representative Morgan and Representative Chase.
I guess the only little bit of concern I still have is like the example Sheriff Anderson used yesterday, that still would give you, like somebody Brattleboro called them, even though they got a PD, they still would be required to do it under this, correct?
Yeah, and so the thing we wrestled with in here was, do we inconvenience the sheriff, at least until we do some more work in this area, which I'm really committed to doing next year? Or do we put it on the survivor to sort of find the right law enforcement agency? And in the balance for this particular moment,
Next year, we'll sort of see what the data shows.
yeah, that report back, I think is
Okay.
it's as much as I can make a promise, or we can as a committee, that we're going to keep looking at this issue, because I don't think we've solved it here. But on balance, I'd rather put some inconvenience on sheriff's offices than on survivors.
Yeah, I get that. I get that piece.
Okay. So Representative Chase and then Representative Hooper.
Okay, legal usage of the word assistance. I don't want somebody to interpret this as requiring the sheriff to help them carry their couch. Would security or a different word be more appropriate there?
Well, I can say that the assistance, if the individual requesting assistance, they would have to have a relief from abuse order.
Right.
Ready. So that perhaps goes some of the distance, but we could certainly add language to clarify if anybody wants.
I think since we're talking about it being pursuant to the RFA,
Okay.
that satisfies that for me.
The understanding is that they're, yeah.
Okay.
But
It doesn't say that the victim shall not be charged.
that's the next piece. We haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Representative. Representative.
Timeliness. Keep a little note. I don't know if this is an issue or not, but if you're going back in for your medication or something, the sheriff's office saying, yeah, we can do that in 2 weeks, isn't really helpful.
I think we have more work to do in this area.
All right.
I don't think we're going to solve all the problems with standby service in this bill. I think we've got something here that both the network and the sheriffs can live with for now. But that's a good point, Representative Hooper. I think we could do an entire bill that was about standby services.
Probably.
And probably should next year. Representative Boyd.
Well, I was just wondering, I feel like this is one thing we didn't talk about, is there some type of timeline that comes with a relief fund order? You know, like you have X amount of time
Might have to ask.
Yeah, to like go through the process of gathering your things and that would be like a network question. But I don't think it's worth digging into.
Yeah, I don't know that there's anyone here that's qualified to answer that.
No.
It's a great question.
I've never seen that on like the contents of the bill.
Yeah.
No. So that would be like a standard rules maybe within the organization.
Yeah, I'm wondering if like to address Representative Rivers' concerns, if there's something outside of what we do that would address that. Yeah, did that make sense?
Yeah, I think the focus of the language as it came over from the Senate and what was supported by the network, what we heard from Karen and in written communication from other folks that from the network was that they want to make sure that no law enforcement agency is charging survivors, and that it's not on the survivor if they are reaching out to a sheriff's office. It's kind of not on them to sort of find the right law enforcement agency. But again, I do think there are gaps, and I don't think we've totally solved this issue in this bill. All right, Tim, let's go to that next piece, which I think is pretty relevant.
Yes, so a new section 6A has been added, and this will create a new chapter entitled 20, specifically chapter 209, which will be titled General Law Enforcement Services. Of one section, which will be section, 4641, to be titled Prohibition, Standby Fees. We'll read, no law enforcement officer or law enforcement agency shall seek a fee from the individual seeking assistance or being assisted in the retrieval of personal belongings or the personal belongings of the individual's dependents from the individual's house pursuant to 24 VSA section 293C or any representative of that individual.
Representative Clinton.
Yeah, Tim, and maybe even the title of this chapter says it, General Law Enforcement Services. I know we talked yesterday about including a whole bunch of other things in there about the first law enforcement agency that's contacted would have to respond, but that would necessarily have to be put in another section of law, because this was the sheriff's section. So is this specifically in general law enforcement so that we're going to know about it beyond sheriff's?
Yes, that was the intent from our office, was to put it in a title which would apply to public safety writ large. And although the Vermont statutes annotated are somewhat awkward in where they house the various aspects of law enforcement throughout the state, DPS is in Title 20. Title 24 has both county government and municipal policing in it. So there's some aspects over there, but the Title 20 has CJC in it and other kind of broader law enforcement regarding aspects of statute in there. So we thought that perhaps best appropriate and easiest to find for everybody.
Okay, yeah, great.
And Tim, as we work on this in the future, as I read this, it sounds like this only applies to saying law enforcement agencies can't charge a fee to the individual requesting the standby service, but it wouldn't preclude us from setting up a funding mechanism that, for instance, like went through the network or DSAS where there could be a bill back. It's just that a law enforcement agency can't can't ask the individual, can't charge the individual a fee.
That is correct.
To make sure we're anticipating future work on this and tying ourselves up in knots next year in the future year. All right. Is that the extent of the new language, Tim?
Yes, that is all of the updates in this draft.
So I want to open it up for any committee questions, committee discussion. we're going to hear from Sheriff Anderson. He wanted to offer some feedback on this latest draft next, and then we'll talk about whether we're ready to move this thing. Sheriff Anderson, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Mark Anderson, Windham County Sheriff, and I am here in my capacity as the president of the Vermont Sheriff's Association. I came with very brief testimony today, simply to say the Vermont Sheriff's Association began its testimony on S-17 broadly in support of reforms that brought meaningful change to sheriffs. We thank the House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs for your time and the thoughtfulness on S-17. As you've already identified, we acknowledge that S-17 and Draft 5.2 accomplishes many meaningful reforms. We also feel that there is work to be done, and we're committed to working with the committee to do that in future sessions. We acknowledge time has run out. So I think the simplest thing I can say at this point, and I'm pleased to say, the Vermont Sheriff's Association has changed its position to support S-17 as crafted by this committee.
Thank you, Sheriff Anderson. I appreciate the thoughtful conversation that we've had in this room. I think that the bill as it came over to us had some good things in it that we've been able to work on together and make some improvements. And I appreciate the Sheriff's Association supporting the work that we've done that's led us to this draft. Does anybody have any questions for Sheriff Anderson? All right. Anything else you want to leave us with?
The Sheriff's Association asks for a unanimous bipartisan vote. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that. So, committee, we've been on quite a journey with S-17. I really appreciate the thoughtful work that folks have put in to lead us to this draft. I guess I want to start off our committee discussion by acknowledging that the constitutional limits of what we can do in order to suspend a sheriff that's got pending criminal charges and address some of the immediate concerns that I came to the table with at the beginning of the session based on some things that were going on in my county and things that had gone on historically in a few counties. We're really limited, and I made reference to that several times in here, and just wanted to get on the record that we have more work to do, and I think that the professional law enforcement officers and law enforcement leaders who've come in here and talked to us about their support for meaningful reform, transparency, accountability. There have been some serious conversations in here, and we're limited in what we can do in order to provide that. But at the same time, I didn't want S-17 to be a bill that financially or operationally got in the way of providing really vital public safety services. So I think we've gotten to a place here where we've got some good, meaningful changes, but there's still a lot more work to be done. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, and I applaud you, all the stakeholders here for doing some good work. In regard to the concerns you raised about a few sheriffs, is there a statute of limitations or time frame in legislative rules to look at impeachment?
I think that's a great question for us to delve into with legislative counsel. My understanding is that impeachment really is a political process, and it's on us to, look at the Constitution and what defines things like maladministration. But I don't know of any. Tim, could you maybe answer Representative Murwicki's question there isn't some kind of statute of limitations on when a legislature could act in terms of impeachment, to my knowledge, but.
I can certainly look into it and provide you a better answer than I'd be able to provide off the cuff.
As it relates to S17, it'd be fair to say, as we kind of captured in the findings, short of resignation or death while in office or impeachment, there really isn't a way for the legislature to provide that level of accountability that would suspend or remove sheriff who the process is impeachment. So we kind of abandoned that and looked at this sort of narrower window of best practices, model policies, and things where I think we've made some improvements, but probably haven't gotten to the heart of the matter with a couple of the more extreme cases, which are the exception. I mean, I think this committee's done a good job of holding the two things of supporting good law enforcement practice and trying to strengthen the public safety services that we have, and having the accountability and transparency without sort of saying, trying to paint with too broad a brush. Representative Hooper.
I think the bill has come a long way from the first reading where it was find a rope in the tree. I think we've done pretty well on it, and if appropriate, recommend we, or move that we move S17 5.2 forward with positive recommendation.
I think that is very welcome. So Mason's doesn't require us to second that, but I appreciate the enthusiasm.
Very. Can we check that Rep. Hooper still can hear us and is with us before we start that?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Just doing a check for you, Representative Hooper Randolph, making sure you're still with us.
Seth, you are so considerate. I am indeed of Randolph, in Randolph. I am ready to go.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any further discussion from the committee?
Not discussion, Mr. Chair, but again, appreciate, and I don't want to leave anybody out, but Sheriff Marcoux, Sheriff Harlow up my way, instrumental in keeping in touch. Department of State's attorneys and sheriffs, VSEA, judiciary, all of them, I think, in our testimony anyway, really got involved and stepped up, and I appreciate that. And hopefully we'll have that going. I'm sure we'll have that going. I appreciate it.
No further hands. The clerk shall commence to call the roll.
Representative Brown.
Yes.
Representative Boyden, yes. Representative Haga.
Yes.
Representative Morgan.
Yes.
Representative Cooper Burlington.
Yes.
Representative Murphy.
Yes.
Representative Chase.
Yes.
Representative Waters Evans.
Yeah.
Representative Cooper Randolph.
Yes.
Representative Nugent.
Yes.
Representative Higley.
Yes.
Representative McCarthy.
Yes.
12-0-0.
That was a lot of work. Thank you all. We're not done.
Question, is this bill going to any other committee after us?
I believe this bill will have to go to a pros.
So as far as you know, judiciary does not see this bill, is that correct?
Nope. I spoke with Representative Lalonde and had him take a look at it. This is squarely in the administration as opposed to any of the kind of criminal pieces that are more in their jurisdiction. But that's a great question. Representative.
Who's gonna report?
I will be the reporter of the bill. Thank you all. All right. Just take a deep breath now for something completely different. Returning to our municipal work, we're going to move on to charter change bills that were brought to us for the city of Burlington's charter. And so we're going to start with H506. And I believe Tucker poked his head in, but isn't back from Ways and Means yet. So maybe what we should do is give him just a few minutes to get down here. I think the committee might welcome that. So why don't we just take